Hello. As ever, we must begin with an annoying legal disclaimer. All views expressed are our own and do not represent the opinions of any employers, organisations or clients for whom we work. Any recommendations or advice given in this podcast may or may not be right for you, depending on your circumstances. So please bear this in mind before taking any action. Charting Tracks is brought to you by Chris O'Gorman, Amir Yaqub and Ben Hennessy-Garside. Chris is a digital marketing strategist and digital manager. He's worked previously for Sony Music and was the head of digital at Capitol Records UK. He currently runs a digital marketing agency and develops music artists, working on brand development and marketing strategy. Amir is a record producer, Grammy Award-winning engineer, a co-owner of Bison Productions recording studios in East London and the director of Garnish Music Production School in London. Ben, who is me, is a singing coach. I'm a multi-instrumentalist, composer and producer. In the past, I've worked in music instrument retail, as a record label scout, a live sound engineer, and I'm currently a lecturer at Leeds Conservatoire, teaching voice to popular music students, alongside being a dad and a husband. This is the second episode of Charting Tracks, and is the first of 3 in which we discuss ways to support people in their progression as music practitioners. Please enjoy. All right. So during the last podcast, we didn't do the best job of all introducing ourselves. We talked a bit about our childhood experiences, but not so much about what we've been doing kind of since then. We'd like to start this podcast with a little bit of an outline of what we do now and what we've done since we were littlies, since we were young'uns. Who wants to kick off? Anyone? Amir or Chris?
Let's have Chris kick off. Come on, Chris.
Okay, go for it.
All right. Yeah. So I do digital marketing in the music industry. I've been doing it for coming on to about, I feel like 14 years or something like that now. So I kind of started in my career as a music journalist and blogger, and kind of did a lot of that, and then started doing social media content, and then got brought in-house to work at Sony Music, where I was running social media and digital marketing campaigns for acts like One Direction and Little Mix, Labyrinth, Ollie Murs, etc. A lot of the Psycho roster of artists, and then after that moved over to Universal Music, where I was head of digital at Capitol Records, and was brought on there to launch 2 new artists. One was Sam Smith, the other was 5 Seconds of Summer, as well as doing digital marketing for some of their global artists as well, like Jennifer Lopez, and then a few developing acts. And then since then, I set up my own consultancy business, where I essentially provide digital consultancy for developing acts and signed acts for labels and management. So anything that's in the kind of digital realm is kind of digital and marketing realm is pretty much where I come in. So it's helping artists brand themselves online, planning digital marketing campaigns and digital ad spend, and essentially how to break a new artist online.
Good times. Brilliant times.
Oh yeah.
Nice. That was good. And you, Amir?
Me, I am a producer, an engineer, a writer as well. After university, when I came out, I didn't really do anything to do with music apart from on a very independent level. And then I managed to work my way into the second biggest studio in London. And I started there as a receptionist at nighttime, and then I moved on to work in the studios, and I became an engineer. And after that, it was, the rest is history, as they say. In my time, I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of big acts and A-listers, as you would call them, I guess. And ever since then, I went on to be freelance. I've worked pretty damn hard in order to build up the studio that I'm in right now. And I also run a music production school in London as well, which has worldwide branches. So apart from that, I'm a mentor, and generally I've just basically worked too many hours. So there you go.
He also has a Grammy.
I was going to say,
Don't know why he hasn't mentioned that.
I don't remember you mentioning that, Amir.
It's a modesty thing.
Okay. Let's get this one out of the way then. So yeah, for the work that I did on Rihanna's Unapologetic album as an engineer, I won a Grammy for that. So yeah,
nice. So this leaves me, which is different. What I'm going to do, I'm awful at this thing. This, like saying what I do thing. So what I will do is I'll just briefly say that I'm a lecturer on the pop degree at Leeds Conservatoire. I teach mainly. Most of my work is working with undergrad students on a one-to-one basis. I'm basically a singing coach with them. And what I'm going to do, because I'm just awful at this, is I'm going to read out what my biography says on the Leeds Conservatoire website. Okay,
nice.
Ben Hennessy-Garside, BA Honours, is a multi-instrumentalist, composer and producer. Now specialising in voice, Ben's role at Leeds Conservatoire is as a coach on the popular music pathway, whilst also working privately in both one-to-one settings and workshops in his home city of Lancaster and nationally via Skype, but it's Zoom these days. His students include, / have included, those with exposure on BBC Radio 1, artists with YouTube views in excess of 2 million, signed artists, and semi-professional function singers, other singing teachers and amateurs. He began playing piano at the age of 12, touched on that last time, and before expanding through voice, drums, bass guitar, composition and technology. He played in and wrote for a number of local bands before attending Leeds Conservatoire in 2003 as an undergraduate, studying for his BA in music production. During his time as a student at Leeds Conservatoire, Ben acted as the Leeds-based scout for Faith and Hope Records, their biggest act. The small Manchester indie, their biggest act was Mint Royale. I don't know if you remember them.
Yeah.
Big
beat.
Yep.
I like them.
Also working in music instrument retail and as a live sound engineer. In 2008, Ben was awarded a postgrad cert in education and has worked in music education ever since, delivering a wide range of units with topics including performance, composition, arrangement theory, sound recording in the music industry, alongside basic piano tuition and the vocal coaching outlined earlier. So yeah, that's my attempt.
Good bio. That's a very good bio.
So let's get on with what we had initially planned to do.
Yep.
If that's cool. And so we were thinking about talking about our grounding or people's grounding in development, right? In progression.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an area that people sometimes forget about. I think it's important. And when we were planning this podcast, there was a bit of a discussion about whether this should go first in advance of the previous one, and we decided to do it the other way around in the end. But it's primacy, or it's near to primacy. It's close to needing to be near the beginning, because it's kind of it sets the way for the rest of what we're going to be talking about. I'd like to talk about a few educational tools that our listeners might be able to use as they progress through this podcast, but also kind of in general in their development. So I'll probably chuck a few of those in. But it'd also obviously be great to hear what you two have to say about that too. Because obviously, I mean, unless people do make progress in life, then they're not going to really get anywhere, right? And so looking at the ways in which it's possible to make progress is a thing people often don't do. They'll just kind of meander through without any real consideration for, a whole heap of different things that hopefully we can cover today. Who wants to kick off here?
Well, I think you should, Ben.
Yeah?
Yeah, man.
What do you think, Chris? Do you want to have it?
I think so, because I feel like your involvement with these sort of artists when they're at this sort of gestation period. You know, you're involved right from the sort of start, but by the time they sort of get to Amir and then later get to me, they've already been through sort of so much of this sort of gestation period, and I think you're at probably the earliest part of that process. So I think that it probably makes sense that you can shine a light on, you know, kind of where that starts and how you do sort of set a foundation for these artists and what that looks like.
Okay. Well, I shall kick off then. So, I think the first thing I would like to talk about, it's really simple little thing. It's a little three-step process. Plan, do, review. Now, in one sense, it's really obvious, right? In life, what we do is we plan, we try and look into the future and decide what we're going to do. Then we do the thing, and then we look back on how well we've done the thing, right? So we plan, we do, and then we review, right? Which is we look back over the thing that we've just done, we evaluate it, and then we plan the next thing. Mm-hmm. Now, it seems really obvious, right? That's how you learn. That's how you develop. You plan, you do, then you review. By the way, you can start anywhere on the cycle. So some people will do, then they'll review, then they'll plan. Other people will review, maybe they'll review other people's work, right? So every time we've listened to a piece of music, I'm going, oh, I want to be able to do that, right? That's great. I want to be able to do that. That's a form of review followed with the beginnings of a plan, right? I want to do that. That's just the start of a plan. Then we might think, well, okay, so how am I going to go about doing that? So the do that arises as a result of that review then becomes, right, well, I'm going to search on the internet, I'm going to download the music, whatever the action might be, or I'm going to go to the music shop and I'm going to buy the piece of music so I can practice it. So that's the doing, right? We go, we do that, we buy the piece of music, we review the piece of music, right? Then we plan to practice it, and then we do the practicing, right? So it seems really obvious. This cycle, it's so open enough to be able to pretty much anything that we do in life, we're going to be moving around the cycle. Being aware of the cycle, though, becomes useful to us when we aren't getting something. Or maybe something's not sinking in properly. Maybe we're trying to practice and it's not sinking quite in. Maybe we keep bashing up against some kind of metaphorical brick wall in our lives, and we can't get past it. One of the reasons why we can't make progress might be because this ratio between planning, doing, and reviewing is out of whack somehow. Maybe we're doing too much planning and too much reviewing and not enough doing. Right? Maybe we're doing too much doing, not enough reviewing. You know? And maybe we're doing loads of planning, loads of doing, but not enough reviewing. Maybe we're doing, you know, so if one of these three areas is off kilter, and depending on what the task is, and depending on who you are, and depending on where you are in your development and your life, the balance between those three things, and depending on the task, depending on a whole heap of different things, the balance between those three things might be different each time. It's not like you need to spend a third on each one of those steps every single time. But being aware of that and remembering that you're a human being, you're a learner, right? There are steps that you're going to be naturally moving through in the process of your development, and just knowing that and being aware of that. And what I was hoping from you two today, on the back of this, is there anything in your life, or could you give some examples where you've moved through those three steps? And if you can't work out right away, maybe pick something that you do in your work, and then we'll see if we can unpick the planning, the doing, and the reviewing stage.
Yeah. I mean, for me, every single album campaign that I've done for an artist is essentially starts with those.
Right.
Those three things are sort of core components. There's, you get the music in from the act once they've sort of done and maybe even before then, actually. There's sort of planning phase, because you might be looking at where the artist is in their career at that point, what their target demographic is, what audience segment of the sort of music consuming population their music is going to be most engaged with by, and then maybe that informs what producers that they then work with, what sounds they want to create, because it can come from two. It normally either comes from the artist and this is what I want to do, or it's this is the sound that's working right now and this is where your demographic is, so let's get in specific producers and writers and try and craft that. So it can be either, but each album campaign essentially starts with the planning phase, which is the audience insight and the audience research, the artist research, what age groups, what demographics, what platforms the audience is on, and then you're planning your entire sort of marketing campaign. It's all very, very front loaded. And then once you launch, you're doing it. It's sort of, you're off to the races then. And you stick to the strategy, and you maybe you review as you go, but generally the reviewing is done at the end when you're like, okay, well, how many albums did we sell? How many albums did we sell in comparison to the previous album from this artist? How many albums did we sell in comparison to the similar, the comparison artists, that we're going up against. And so you might be doing normally then your kind of review process is there, and it's like, well, what was the marketing spent versus how much we recouped and the profit made, and not just that, but then what was because it's for at a certain stage it might not be just about, oh, we're just trying to sell loads of albums this time around. It's actually not so much about the sales, it's more about how much press coverage did we get, how many new followers did we get on social media, how much sort of noise and buzz did we make. But pretty much every album campaign is sort of structured that way. There's the planning phase, the execution phase, and then the sort of review phase. So
nice.
It pretty much it's
that's interesting. Yeah, that it fits so neatly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to talk about something like this because I pretty much would have experienced this on a day-to-day basis most of the time, with obviously projects that I'm working on, but also actually one thing that really jumped out to me, particularly when you said this, Ben, was me thinking of, the business plans that I've done. Obviously, as the owner of a studio, and as a person who is a business themselves, and, and in various other ventures, a business plan is exactly this. So there's obviously the planning. I plan to open a studio, make this much money, for instance, or every month or whatever. Then there's the doing of actually opening the studio, and then the reviewing is actually already written into your business plan. You basically review your business plan and you go, oh yeah, remember when we said we thought we were going to make this much money? Well, are we making that much money or are we not? And where are we falling short? So that's the one that really jumped up for me when you said that, Ben. But obviously, when you are working with any given artist on any given project, at any stage really, you could be in the recording stage, the production, mixing phase, or, wherever you are, there's always a plan, because that's, that's the artistic vision. So it might be like, I want to make a song which is like this other song, and it kind of incorporates elements of another song, and so on and so forth. The doing part of it is obviously gathering everything, putting your parts down, recording vocals, all of that kind of stuff. And funnily enough, if you are going through the phases of, making a record, in a way, when you sit down to mix a record, that's when you are reviewing. Obviously, you do a bit of planning before that phase, and there's a lot of doing when you're actually doing the mixing, but you are reviewing everything else that was done, and you're actually kind of going, well, this part doesn't work that well anymore. Let's get rid of it because it's not contributing to the song. And in a way, your mix can be seen as a little mini review. And obviously, when you go to the mastering phase, that's another review. So it's kind of like sonically, have we hit everything that we wanted to, that we set out to do? No, we haven't. Maybe I'll had a boost here on an EQ, or make that vocal sound less harsh, or whatever it might be that we're trying to do, you know? And in a way, you know, there's, in every stage, in and of itself, there's some planning, doing, reviewing going on. Some of the stages can be counted just as reviews themselves. So if you sat down, for instance, with a guitar and your vocals and you wrote a song, maybe when you took it to a producer, they're going to review your song and go, you know what, that chorus section doesn't work as well as you think it does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest you look for a new chorus, or maybe we edit out some of these lyrics, or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of planning, doing and reviewing in practically every single day. And obviously I might be stating the obvious here, but every day, at the beginning of the day or at the end of the previous day, there's planning, doing, reviewing going on day to day, particularly for me and for you guys as well. You're going to sit down and you're going to go, well, look, I've got to produce this song. I've got to finish, you know, the vocal production on this song, and I've got to do a master on this song, and what am I going to do tomorrow? And you've got to plan that, and then tomorrow you've got to do it. And obviously at the end of the day, you've got to review what you've done, what's outstanding, what you need to do tomorrow. And so there's a good few levels that it works on.
Yeah, and you've both given some really nice examples of almost kind of like the way it happens might happen on like a macro level, right? So, with your marketing campaign, Chris, it's like you get the marketing plan down, then you run the plan, then you review the plan at the end. But this is all happening over quite a large period of time, right? But the other great thing about it is there are different kind of time spans within which it can work. So, I'm trying to think of an example in a studio, Amir, right? So maybe you're recording, I don't know, you're recording a vocal, right?
Yep.
And the doing is the setting up of the mic stand.
Yeah.
But then you find that once choosing the mic, but then you find that when the singer stands at the mic, sings into the mic, you then need to review that. Is it the right mic? Is it in the right position?
Absolutely.
Are you recording it in the right place?
Yeah.
And so very quickly you can run around the cycle too in quite a narrow frame. And the place it really comes into its own for me is practice.
Yeah.
Right. Any work that anytime you're trying to practice. So I mean, obviously, most of my work these days is with singers. So having a consideration for the review of the practice process itself, and I'm not talking about hours and hours and hours ruminating on the how do I improve my practice, but just as you're practicing, a little run through at the end, maybe the final 5 minutes, or you know, how could this have been better? How could I improve that for next time? And that there's all sorts of things that about practice that might make a difference. And so this is the other thing as well that I wanted to talk about, was how do we improve each of those stages? So especially the review stage, there are a number of ways that we can set life up, set our situations up so that they can really help us with reviewing.
Yeah, definitely.
So and a really obvious one is just making recordings, right? So say you're in a band. You have maybe you're practicing 3 or 4 times a week, right? Make a recording of every rehearsal. Set aside a bit of time to listen back to maybe one of those each week and review it, right? Is anybody in that room wasting time all the time, right? You know how in bands you get the noodlers, right? Yeah, who is that person? Maybe they don't even realize they're doing it, but if you've got a recording, you can support them to review their own process as a musician, right? So those noodlers are doing themselves nor anybody else any good by noodling in their practices, right? So finding ways. Well, how can I review? The other one is, and I think we've touched on this, or you've just touched on it before, Amir. Is like engaging outside support. Yeah. So the producer in the pre-production process and during the session as well, they're a reviewer, right? Their role is this going well? Right, we need to plan, we need to change this. Yeah. So engaging outside agents, and your role as well, Chris. Yeah. It's what, as a consultant, it's your job to review. That's kind of what your job is, right? When you're consulting, when you're doing that part of your job, it's like, that's what it is. Using other people, using technology, and also giving yourself the time. That's another thing that people don't do. It's that they don't even give themselves just a few minutes to run over their development. Yeah. You know, you were talking like planning the next day and all that, Amir.
Yeah.
What tools do you use for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if we're just talking about reviewing and planning, I guess. Yeah. So I have a weekly review, and this is just me being at home on a Sunday night, probably like eating some ice cream or chocolate bar or something like that, naughty. But that's my reward for doing the review. I have a weekly review, monthly review, two things that I do, and I do have a daily review, but that's really just, looking over a checklist that I've made, seeing how much I've ticked off, and if I haven't ticked enough off, it moves to the next day. My tool of choice is an app called Todoist. It's basically a to-do list with some extra features like, you can link it to your emails, and if there's an important email, instead of leaving that in my inbox, I'll switch it over to Todoist, and I will just click. I'll look over and I'll go, oh yeah, I have to reply to that very urgent email, for instance. I'll click on the app and it'll go straight back into my emails, and I can reply straight away instead of clogging up my inbox. That's my number one tool. My number two tool for overall kind of like, more of the bigger stuff, the macro stuff, is a tool called Notion. It's what I call my second brain. It's my operating system for life. And that looks at the bigger stuff. So that's like looking more so at goals and achievements and timelines and, mapping out projects and all of that kind of stuff. Todoist deals with micro and to a certain degree, weekly reviews as well. But also in my weekly reviews, I'll look at, things like Notion, how on track am I on a project, or because I'm working on many at a time, and I might be working with, 2, 3, 4 people on a close level. And I want to make sure that I'm hitting my personal targets in delivering stuff for them. So, for instance, today I'm just looking at it on the screen now, and I can see that I've got some stems to send off to a guitarist for a project I'm working on. And that will be something that I'll be doing daily, really. So that's Todoist. But overall, I'll be looking at, for this artist, I've got to have 3 songs ready for release in October. How close am I to that? And you might see this often if we're talking much more creatively. I'm sure you guys have both seen this actually at some point. There'll be a whiteboard with, all of the names of all of the songs and what stage they're at. So, are they written? Are they edited? Have they been mixed? Are the vocals in? Blah, 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 blah. And then obviously, naturally, that's where we would hand off to other people. Our job on the studio side might be done. So, my top 2 tools are definitely Todoist and Notion. So, yeah, there you go.
And a whiteboard.
And a whiteboard. I do like, analog sometimes.
It's great, isn't it, sometimes? Just write it down like an actual old school pen and paper.
I do actually carry a tiny notebook with me everywhere I go, just because sometimes if I'm on a train or something like that, I might just want to write something down. And sometimes it's, you can get sucked into technology particularly because what happens is you're going to do your Todoist and an Instagram notification comes up and then you're distracted by that, or someone emails you or whatever. definitely technology is great. Something like Todoist or Notion. They're not paying me to say this, by the way, but if they want to give me free subscriptions, I'm happy to receive. But analog is great sometimes, and sometimes there's really nothing like pen and paper. So yeah, that's kind of how they fit into my life and how I do things with them.
The way you as an individual practitioner choose to handle this stuff, I think needs to be yours, because we're all different, and it's possible to do this in, like, entirely analog if you want. It's probably going to mean carrying like books and journals and stuff around, but if that's how you want to do it, then do it.
And I mean, even just one last thing to say is, even if you're doing like stuff the analog way, there's different productivity systems and all of that people might follow. One of the most famous ones that I try and follow, albeit quite loosely, is a productivity system by, I think his name's David Allen. It's called Getting Things Done, GTD.
Yeah.
So you guys know about that.
Yeah.
And in, I'd say 70-80% of that is kind of what I try and follow, because I have the typical kind of, I've got a million things on my brain. I just need to dump them somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
However you choose to do it is probably just, it takes a bit of working out. But one thing I probably couldn't live without is my electronic calendar. And going back to what you said, Ben, it's, just to wrap that point up on my side, when it comes to reviewing, the good thing about an electronic calendar, or any calendar, but particularly electronic ones, they're very easy to see, is that you can easily, obviously, plan, but you can easily review stuff as well. So you can go, actually, we've been in the studio for 5 days across, 10 weeks, and all we've got is a half a song. That's never happened, by the way. But it allows you to go, what? This is, working with this person is a waste of time. Right? I mean, if it needs to be, it's a review, isn't it? A bad review, but it's a review nonetheless. So
or something about that creative process is not working for them, or
yeah.
Maybe because some people maybe need to come to the studio with a fully formed finished thing, and some people love the energy being in the studio, and that's where it's just people work differently, don't they, I suppose?
That's right, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Some people like to spend loads of time in the studio and just vibe and see what comes out, and other people are like, I've got this song, I want it finished by 3 days, and let's go.
And I'm not even going to step foot into the studio until it's written and I pretty much have the bones of it completely there. And
exactly. Exactly.
Again, it's just people. It's interesting what you're saying about, like the analog way of doing things as well, because it might sound counterintuitive from like a digital marketing person to say it, but normally at the start of any campaign, when we're sitting down for the artist, not just the artist, something with the artist management as well, when we and the rest of the broader team, one of the first things to do actually is just an analog kind of idea session, where it's like, because there's so much digital distraction.
Yeah.
As soon as you obviously we'll kind of start off and have all of our stats and say this is where the artist currently is and this is where we want them to be, but then it's like, right, shut everything off and now we're going to just do an idea session, because it gets like the brain working in a completely different way, and it ends up a boardroom filled with post-it notes on the walls. But it's funny that actually a lot of the times I notice with artists as well, as soon as you start doing that, it does seem to get a different part of the brain working, and it can often be a helpful thing to do just to jog ideas, really. In terms of like tools and stuff, I think I use similar things to what Amir mentioned, but I think more than like tools, it's probably like a methodology. And for me, it's like the methodology I always come back to is like a similar thing to what you mentioned, but it's like the OST method, which is just objective, strategy, tactics, and it's really simple top line. It's like but it's something that can easily get missed. The amount of times I sit down with an artist and they haven't really thought about it in this way, and it's like the objective, well, actually, what are you trying to achieve? What do you want out of this? Mm-hmm. And then the strategy is the broad plan of how you're going to do that, and then the tactics are the individual specific things you're going to do. So if you're like, your objective is, I want to have a top 10 single. Okay, well, then your strategy is, well, I'm going to harness my existing fan base. I'm going to broaden out to current fans, to new fans beyond my fan base. I'm going to take advantage of I'm going to produce something that's in the sound that's filling the charts at the moment. That's sort of the top level strategy. And then your sort of more granular tactics of like, what social platforms I'm going to be on, what advertising formats I'm going to use, what budgets I'm going to use, what blogs are we going to target, what publications, what radio stations, is it going to be specialist radio, is it going to be, is it going to be special publications, is it going to be more mainstream depending on what you're going after. So it's like that methodology always for me is kind of what I sort of tend to run everything through, because it's amazing how often and I think this is one of the things that happens with a lot of artists is when they sort of set off into the world, they're like, I just want to see where this is going, which is fine. And it's great as long as you know that. But I think a lot of the times artists seem to get frustrated is they're not setting out with a understanding of what they want to achieve. And so what ends up happening is they end up getting frustrated and they're not really sure why they're frustrated. And it's like, well, actually, I wanted to be here at this point. It's like, okay, well, that's great to acknowledge that in the first instance, because if you were, even if that objective is maybe not realistic, it's like, okay, well, aim for that, shoot for the stars, land on the moon, great. But if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, how do you know what success looks like? And how do you review? How do you measure?
Yeah, definitely.
You're just going with the flow and seeing what happens. Now, if you're an artist that says, actually, I want to just see where this goes, that's fine too. And that might be, you just want to see what happens. That's great. But then know that you're doing that and be conscious and, be cognizant of the fact that that's what you're doing, so that you don't have the same sort of pressures. Because what normally happens is like artists start feeling like, I feel like I'm not breaking through. I feel like it's not working. And it's like, okay, then that and it's most of the time it's because you haven't taken a step back and set your objective at the very start. And then you get artists that are kind of realistic and they're like have a much more pragmatic approach. And they're like, okay, my objective right now is I just want to get on a good support slot with an artist or band that's in my kind of genre. It's that has a similar target demographic to me. That's what I want to do right now. And then everything, and then each time you build up a level and build up a level and build up a level. And normally it's like there might be your overarching career aspiration, so an objective, strategy and tactics for the artist's career, like the long term, the next 10, 20 years. And then within that, there's a separate objective, strategy, tactics for each phase. So it might be an objective, strategy, tactics for the next 6 months and what that looks like, and so on. So it's kind of like a bit of a sort of career strategy there, and then underneath the individual campaigns of how to build to that. But everything for me, I always run through that objective, strategy, tactics model.
That's really brilliant. And one thing to say, just to pick up on what you said there as well, is that these timelines are very important. I think personally, thinking about timelines is one of the best things that you can do in your career, actually, regardless of what you want to do. Even if you want to be an artist manager, thinking about timelines as an artist manager, what do you want to achieve in 6 months from now, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Yeah. And I've never heard of that tactic or strategy, OST, before. Methodology is what you'd call it, I guess. But it's a very interesting one. I'm going to look into that myself, actually.
It's really helped structure things, I think. And it's very top line. It's not like, people hear strategy and go, that sounds really... Strategy is just literally a top line view of how are we going to try and achieve the objective.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
Tactics are really where you drill into the detail.
Yep. Yep. What about you, Ben? What have you got?
That getting things done process, David Allen's. There's How to Be a Productivity Ninja as well. There's some really good stuff in there. I've found that journaling works. I mean, just one thing. I think I have a fairly young family, and that just annihilates a lot of this stuff. You'll find that if we take this plan, do, review model, you'll find that you'll plan to do a thing and then you can't do the thing because there's some emergency, maybe one of the children's pooed themselves, or or you've got to go and pick them up from nursery because they've thrown up, and so you're midway through trying to do the thing that you planned, and then you can't do it, and so then you're trying to review, and you're constantly trying to reevaluate what's actually achievable. And I think this is an important thing to point to, and I think you touched on it a little bit, Chris, with the, sometimes you've got artists that just have kind of maybe just got goals and achievements that aren't necessarily so stratospheric as winning a Grammy or or whatever, and so there is something about that. It's about being really honest with yourself, being really aware of your capabilities, being really aware of what you can do and the time in which you can do it. And it's also really important that you set yourself, if you're planning, that you try your best to try and plan for things that are actually achievable.
Yeah. Agreed.
Because this is the other thing that one surefire way of failing is not planning for anything, like you say, Chris. Another way of failing is just setting yourself ridiculous targets. It's better that, in my opinion, right, it's better that you set yourself like a really easy kind of almost, pithy, pointless task, and then achieve it, because then you're going to bank a little bit of self-respect
and get the boost from that.
It's far better that you do that than you set yourself some stratospheric goal that's impossible for you to reach. And then again, it depends on kind of knowing yourself, right? As we progress through this podcast series, we're going to be talking a lot about quote unquote the self, right? In a number of different ways. But this is one way in which knowing yourself is really quite important. If you brush off failure fairly well, right? Absolutely. Like fine. But if failure really, really cuts deep, just be wary about. I mean, if you want to be successful, you need to work with you. You need to work with what you've got, right? It's like we don't always get to choose where we're at. We don't get to choose the body that we're in. We don't get to choose the background and our upbringing that we've had. We don't get to choose the brain that we've got. We don't get to choose our natural proclivities. There's a whole heap of things that we don't have control over, and so it's knowing what's reasonable and what's not, and set yourself achievable goals so you're not disheartened. Because that can really kill progression. Like we're talking about progression today.
Absolutely.
If you're setting yourself something that's unreasonable,
that's absolutely right. And we're like, and for a lot of us, when I sit down with them at the very sort of start of when they're kind of in their career sort of planning mode, career planning phase, it's about saying look, it's going to take 3, possibly even 4 years to break a new artist. It can happen quicker than that. Probably with the use of a reality TV show or some other kind of launch pad like that, or a great tour, but generally speaking, to break a new artist is like I'd say the minimum you can do it in is probably 2 years. And a lot of the times it's like, what? And it's like, yeah, of course, because you've got to spend time building your fan base. You've got to spend time introducing yourself to your audience, to tastemakers, and then gradually building out to like the more wider music consuming world. And I think that's the thing. And if an artist understands, okay, these are the milestones that I'm trying to hit, rather than like, oh, I have to summit Mount Everest. Well, you don't just go, I'm going to summit Mount Everest. You go, you do the training, and you have to go through the hard yards first, and you have to set yourself the milestones. And the first milestone is get to base camp. There's probably milestones before that, actually. Getting to base camp is probably a pretty far along the process one, and then there's getting up to camp 1, camp 2, and each time you're building up. And that's how pretty much every successful artist that I've ever worked on has gone through that. I think there are exceptions to that, but it's normally when the artist has been thrust into a huge launch pad, and it normally is something like the X Factor or Britain's Got Talent, where you've got the heat, you've got the eyes of, the whole country and sometimes the eyes of the world as well, because you've got this huge exposure from that media opportunity. So then you have to just move fast, and then it's like you're at the races already. But that's a very different way to doing it if you're, and because I've done both. I've done artists that came through the sort of X Factor process, or I've got ones that were, starting from scratch, really, having them out on the road, playing, industry showcases and sort of tastemaker gigs and support slots and stuff. So, I think if you're an artist, if you're somebody like Madonna, who kind of had it fairly thick skin and could kind of be like, this is what I want to do. I want to be at the top of this game. And it was like water off duck's back at all the criticism. She was just like tunnel vision. Then that can work. But you really have to be like honest with yourself. Am I the kind of artist that can take that? Or am I the kind of artist that like, this is what I want to achieve the next 6 months. This is what I want to achieve within the next year, within the next couple of, and if you can set those sort of miles, it's about just having a realistic trajectory. And I think people hear realistic and think, oh, that means you don't have self-belief, or because you have to have a lot of self-belief to want to do this, and maybe even a little bit of delusion. Delusion can actually be an asset sometimes in this, but what you have to do is understand that having a realistic approach isn't necessarily not having belief. It's about there is a time process, there is an amount of time that it takes to build the foundations for an artist's career, and it's very hard to circumvent that. It's very hard to sort of skip that. Even the most talented artists in the world, you can't really skip those processes. Like I said, pretty much the only way that you can is if they've had some huge media exposure where there's a sort of a audience there already ready and waiting, or maybe they've kind of somehow become like a big star online and they've got this sort of ready-made audience, and you're off to the races already a little bit earlier. Generally speaking, you can't skip those steps, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a failure. It's not a negative. It's something that actually, when I've charted out for artists what the next few years look like, they're like, okay, got it. I'm in this for the long haul. I really want this, so this makes sense to me, and it actually helps them. It's like they feel less frustrated. They feel like they're progressing and they're getting to where they want to be. So on the whole, I think it helps them.
Yeah. Two things stick out for me. One is how do you get to achieve your goals, and what it comes down to is coming back to the OST method a little bit as well, Chris. Let's say I think, Chris, one time when we played tennis, I spoke to you about this because we both love sports, psychology, and, one of the examples that I spoke to you about was someone who wanted to be an Olympic swimmer. And this guy didn't say, I want to win gold at the Olympics. He said, I want to be an Olympic swimmer. Right. And so he was already a decent swimmer, but he wasn't an Olympic swimmer. And I remember watching this TV documentary like when I was like 15 or something like that. And the guy said, I went to the coach, and the coach sat me down and he went, look, you're not an Olympic swimmer right now, but if we can just shave 1 second off your time every month for the next 16 months or something, you will be an Olympic swimmer. And it's just so weird to think that 1 second, all we need to do is get back by 1 second every single month, and I can qualify for the Olympics. Yeah. And I think he did go on to win maybe a bronze or something in one of the Olympics, whatever stroke he was doing. But that is realistic, and that's taking a massive thing of I want to be an Olympic swimmer and breaking it down into the most bite-sized chunk ever, and something that's realistic and achievable, and if you put the hard work in and everything. And that was really what stuck out to me from what you said, but particularly hanging on to that word realistic, and also, what is your goal?
Yeah, but that thing, it's like those marginal gains, isn't it? And that's kind of, I think Serena Williams talks about this as well.
Oh yeah, we love Serena.
When it's like, actually, if I can just get my first serve percentage up a little bit, that's going to make the difference between me winning by a narrow margin and winning by a much bigger margin. So,
well, this is it. Yeah, this is absolutely
so her big ultimate goal is she wants to break Margaret Court's record of
Yeah,
24 Grand
yeah.
Slams, whatever it is, I don't know.
course.
But it's like, that's the end goal, though that's the big goal. But then there's individual goals in that. Okay, have a higher first serve percentage, have my movement better on the court, vary my shots more. It's like you break it down into those little granular tactics,
Yep.
and those tiny little incremental gains, those marginal gains,
Yeah, for sure.
all add up.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
There's books that, both I've had conversations with Chris and we've both read them, at least things like Atomic Habits, things like The Compound Effect, a book called The Slight Edge. All of these books are just based around, actually, guess what? If you start today and, you expect to be number one worldwide or win a Grammy or whatever your lofty goal is by tomorrow, it's not going to bloody happen.
Yeah.
It happens in tiny incremental stages as you go along. But that's where actually, if you chart how today's biggest artists got to where they are, it's not necessarily that they had that kind of quick leap to fame and that was it. And then they've managed to maintain that consistently. Most of it was like a very slow build.
Yeah.
And a build which they've done over the years, and those years might be 10, they might be 20. To be considered anything like a legend in the game of music, you probably have to have put in a good 20, 25 years of actually consistently putting out great music and performing great shows and all of that kind of stuff.
Every overnight success is years in the making.
Well, that's
sort of...
well, there you go. That's it.
Yes. Because what we're talking here is it's about motivation, isn't it? Really, it's about maintaining motivation and acknowledging that you're a psychological entity, and working out exactly who you are and which steps need to be achieved in order to keep that kind of upwards and forward motion and momentum. I wanted to talk a little bit about different types of motivation as well, actually. Have you heard of, you probably will have, the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators?
Yep, I have.
I actually haven't.
Okay, cool. Okay, so an intrinsic motivator is something that comes from inside. So you feel like you want to do the thing, so you go and do the thing, right? The vast majority of things ought to be, if we were living in a perfect world, a result of intrinsic motivation in people, right? Whereas extrinsic motivators, right, which can include money sometimes, but it's any form of kind of carrot, right, or the threat of a stick. Another way of talking about it is that there's an if-then reward, right? So for Amir, every time he rewards himself to do this two hour review, or however long it is he spends on his weekly reviews, that's like an external motivator. Yeah. If you want to be doing things creatively, and if you want to be in a kind of playful state, and you want to be able to find your way into kind of something similar to a flow state, right, which is where lots of artists want to be when they're making their music, you're better removing all extrinsic motivators, right? This thing about, and I'm talking here about a lot of work done by a guy called Dan Pink. So yeah, if you want to Google search, Google for Dan Pink and motivation, you can actually ruin things by applying extrinsic motivators to things that are already intrinsically valuable to someone. Right.
Yeah.
Now, this thing about the first album always being the best.
Yeah.
And the second album always being crap.
Yeah.
I think this is a key part, because the first album, this was when they wanted it, right? The band wanted this, or the group, or the artist, the individual, they wanted that success, and they've probably been on that trajectory, as we've talked about, for years, right? Yeah. And they've been driving it, and they haven't been making any money. There's no sniff of a Grammy award, Maybe they've been after a deal or something, but a lot of those songs would probably have been written before they even understood the industry well enough to want to want to go and find a deal, right?
Yeah, not knowing if anyone would ever even hear them.
Right. And so I think once the pressure's on and there's an expectation and then there's a label or just the industry in general kind of dangling money in front of them, quite often the first deal for artists is a bit crap anyway, right?
Yeah.
So so that's the other thing too, right? So in a kind of weird, twisted way, by taking all the money off the table, the results can end up being better because money is an if-then reward. It's a carrot.
It's the expectation as well. It's the fans are expecting this now. The industry's expecting this now. The critics are expecting this now. And then, then you're thinking about things that you weren't thinking about.
Exactly, because they're all extrinsic factors, aren't they?
Yeah.
Sure. And I wanted to link this idea to one that you laid out earlier, Chris, when you were talking about the analog process and like getting post-it notes out and sticking them, being quite physically animated in a space. I'm guessing, you didn't say as much, but I'm guessing that you'll find that the results from those sessions where people are kind of on their feet, writing stuff out, there's a buzz in the room, there's a sense of people maybe having a bit of fun, God forbid, in a planning meeting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you're having a bit of fun and you're intrinsically kind of like engaged in the process, the results are, I'm assuming, are going to be a little bit better. There's going to be more creative thinking, there's going to be more ideas, there's going to be likely, and as a result, better ideas around.
It's where the best ideas came from, actually. Like the ideas, like to do the Sam Smith Google Play Live, which was basically like the first live streamed TV advert, which is basically live streamed from Sam's gig at the Roundhouse in London. Basically, that came from an idea session that was like, no laptops, no phones, everyone in the drawer.
It's like you're having fun again, like
you're having
a kid.
fun. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where those and loads of other ideas like that superhero campaign we did for 5 Seconds of Summer as well, actually, which sounds ridiculous, but it came from a similar session like that, just an idea session with the artist and with the team, and like no prejudgment, no kind of like no bad ideas, just what would the fans think is fun. And and that's often where those best ideas come out from, rather than if you're sat there. And it sounds completely counterintuitive. You're like, we're planning a digital campaign, but we're going to have no laptops or phones in the room. But actually, 9 times out of 10, it's been where the best ideas have come from.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is trying to recreate the conditions that were with us when we were children.
Yeah,
right. That thing about just have fun, and then you learn and you create, and trying to feed some fun into whatever it is that you're doing, like make it enjoyable, know. So however you can create that, the playfulness, just feed it in, especially if it's anything in any way creative, right? If you're not feeling that fire from inside, then and you're kind of relying on like a paycheck or a nice cake, or if you're always waiting for that thing at the end. So it depends on the function of whatever it is that you're doing, right? So I mean, Amir, I'm intrigued by this your weekly review, right? Does it feel like a bit of a chore to you? I got the impression that it's kind of like, this is kind of, that's why you need those little rewards. Am I right or not?
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. And that's the thing about, it's so funny that what we just touch upon is, let's make things fun and all of that kind of stuff. But the thing is, actually, in the most part, you look at things like planning, doing, reviewing, setting goals, all of that kind of stuff, and it's actually quite boring, right? So there's no real fun in me sitting down on a Sunday night, going, oh God, it's coming up to 9 o'clock. I need to sit down and for an hour, look over stuff, get my life in order, and just look over what's happening and what's to come. There's no real fun in that. The only fun is I might get a nice little treat in the form of something that I don't usually have, like, you know, a waffle with ice cream or something like that, something decadent.
That'll do it.
And yeah, I need something.
Right.
There's the extrinsic factor or motivation.
So, I suppose this is the question. Do you need that to be particularly creative? Because this is the other thing that came out from Dan Pink's work, and it's worth noting, which is that extrinsic motivators do work in certain circumstances.
Yeah.
So if it's a thing that everybody knows is boring, right, and it's just a job that just needs to be done, right, then an extrinsic motivator, if there's nothing that you could do to make that process more fun or enjoyable or in and of itself, if there's no way that you can make that time enjoyable, then all you've got is extrinsic motivators, and actually they work quite well for those kind of things.
Yeah, they most certainly do. And obviously there's a part of me that goes, yes, I know I need to do this for myself, and just to stay on top of things. Is it fun? No. But you know, it's funny that you mentioned being a child, because there's a lot that goes into that. And obviously I personally want to try and bring a lot of that into everything that I do creatively. But you know, it's almost like it's not a creative task, is it? Sitting down and reviewing stuff and planning stuff. Not in that sense anyway. It can be, take Chris's example, for instance, that's much more creative than me saying I need to put this studio session in on this day.
But I reckon there are some people that love that shit, though.
Of course there are.
There are some
definitely.
people that just like taking chaos, right, and turning it into order.
I'm not that person.
I actually quite like that. I like the logistics of it. Of once you've planned the campaign, it's like, right, this asset's gonna drop then. This is gonna coincide with this single going to radio, and this social media activity is gonna happen then. It's all lined up. I quite like having the sort of the timeline and the different elements all lined up. I actually quite enjoy it. I like the logistics of it.
Unless it's something to do with a musical project, as in within a project. I can't. Yeah. I just can't find it. I have to find a way, some sort of way, to go back to being a kid. And obviously, when I was a kid, and ever since then, I've always loved ice cream, for instance. So, you know, having an ice cream and waffles is like, yeah, I'll do it. But yeah, you know, I think you're right. It can be something that you actually love doing. I've said it to many people on WhatsApp conversations that I've had with them. I need a PA, because they'd probably enjoy doing that, and they're organizing the chaos, and that is my life, and you know, they would love that, and that would be great. But until that point, obviously, I'm just like, I'm gonna have to get some ice cream and you know, just sit down on a Sunday and chill.
Use the extrinsic motivators until you can afford to pay somebody that's intrinsically motivated to work with you on it.
Yep, exactly. I have absolutely zero intrinsic motivation to do this task. You know, but it's definitely something I know I need to do, and if I don't do it, then there'll be more chaos. But yeah, shit, there's no part of me that wants to do it.
Sometimes the reward is knowing that it's I'm going to have a much easier week next week because I've taken this time to plan this.
Yeah, of course, exactly.
It's like the Abraham Lincoln quote of something like, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe.
Exactly, yep, so, I love that quote.
When I actually then cut, at least I'm then not having to use all the brawn and all the effort of doing it, my job's going to be easier because I've taken the time to prepare.
Sure. Although one thing I would add to that is if you've got somebody that loves physical work, and maybe they're a little hyperactive, or they've just got loads of energy in them. Some people just need to slug that tree down.
Yeah, that's
with
true.
a blunt axe.
That's true.
It's like know yourself, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to be touching on that, I think, next time from like an artistic perspective and a branding perspective.
Yeah.
But it fits here too in the development process. Is like know who you are, know where you stand. Don't beat yourself up because you don't have the intrinsic motivations that other people do. They are them for reasons. You're you for reasons. Like you do you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Know what that is, and then it's like navigate how if you need that ice cream on the Sunday to get you through your weekly review, take the ice cream, But in the long run, as Amir said, maybe think about getting somebody in to work with you so that they can do that job really, really well.
Yeah.
So that if there's a bunch of people in an organization intrinsically motivated to be doing whatever it is that they're doing, like, it's just going to be better, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's why, with as artists develop in their career, there'll become a point when they're doing everything themselves, and it's not necessarily the best use of their time, because it's time away from writing songs or creating the music product or planning what their set's going to be like, and practicing and rehearsing. But there's a point where obviously they just need to do it, and then they have to do the DIY musician thing for a while, and then there'll be a point at where, okay, now it's time. There's a tipping point where now it's appropriate to hire a manager who's going to take the logistics and the planning and the organizing and a lot of that stuff off their hands, so they can then focus on the creative and the actual, the actual core elements of being an artist. And there's a tipping point where that happens, and then you put people where their strengths are. So generally speaking, managers tend to be more organized, and there's two different types of managers really. Sometimes there's just the really strategic business savvy managers who aren't necessarily about, like, there's sort of a artist manager, and there's a day-to-day manager who's
exactly.
Organized. Day-to-day managers will be like, they're getting you on the plane, they're getting you to that venue, they're getting you out that venue, getting you to that radio station. They have your day planned out in almost like military precision. And then there'll be like maybe a business manager who's more the sort of blue sky thinking, strategic.
Yeah, exactly.
This is how we're going to develop your careers. But as your business grows, as your little unit that you're building for yourself grows, you can bring other people and other team members in. You put team members where their strengths are. Yeah,
definitely. And all of this and most of this conversation that we're having around this stuff reminds me of as something that I do as a mentor with my mentees, if you want to call it that, is we look at them as a business, and what we do is what would be called a SWOT analysis. SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this kind of comes back to what Ben was saying about know thyself. Know what your strengths are and keep playing to those, and keep, putting those first and forward in order to sell yourself or whatever it is that you're trying to do to progress. But all the time be working on your weaknesses and know what they are. And if it is, in this instance, a weakness of yours is to organize stuff or whatever, then know that someone somewhere down the line is going to be a good idea that someone else does that for you. DIY it for as long as you can. One of the first moves that you should make, I guess, when you feel you're at a stage where it would be appropriate, is to have a manager on board.
And there's a tipping point. And also, I think, though, going through that DIY process, do it for as long as you can, just because you'll get a lot of great skills out of it.
Yeah, of
and
course.
Then you'll learn what exactly are elements that you do need somebody else to do, and which bits actually you should do, and which things you're going to hold on to, and which bits you're not. And actually, only by doing it, you're going to sort of, through experience, you're going to go, those bits I'm not good at.
I just want to caveat that. It isn't just by doing it, it's also by reviewing it and then also planning the next stage.
And then you're planning, because
Sorry.
Then when you're planning, exactly, it is though, because that's the thing, is then when you're reviewing what went well from, say you're a DIY artist and you just planned a national tour for yourself, you plan it, then you go and do it, and then at the end you're going to review and go, that worked, that didn't work, I need somebody that's better at this part of it than I am. So yeah, absolutely, it does flow back to the plan, do, and review.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, tick, star, whatever it is that you need to do on whichever platform it is that you're listening to us on or watching us on. We're out across a few different ones, so there are different systems for each. If you want to comment, do that. Reach out, send us some love, and we'll send you some back.